Planet Coaster 2 has launched right into the hands of a sceptical mob of players because, let's be real here, is this so-called sequel actually worthy of the title, or is it just a cheap slap of paint over a classic that could easily have been released as some DLC? Now, the first Planet Coaster, for all its flaws, gave us the kind of creative freedom you'd dream of in theme park design. We're talking about a game that would let you build every last burger stand and overpriced souvenir stall just like you were the next Walt Disney. But let's not forget, if there was ever a shortfall, it was in the management side of things. So Planet Coaster 2 has some low-hanging fruit here to grab onto and make the sequel worthy. It turns out though, it's a classic case of one step forward, two steps back. Frontier apparently missed the memo on what we punters actually wanted. So put the kettle on, pour yourself a strong cuppa, and let's go full throttle in today's review. So let's get the big question out the way. Is Planet Coaster 2 just a lazy reskin? Well, no, it's not quite that, but let's not kid ourselves, it sure as hell ain't a proper sequel either. Truth is, this is Planet Coaster 1.5, and that's just a kick in the teeth to the fan base. I'm a massive fan of the original, poured hours of my sad, lonely life into building dream parks and squeezing every last penny out of gullible punters, but the more you play through this sequel, the more you clock just how much they've left out, and it makes you wonder what Frontier was smoking when they dreamt up some of this nonsense. But let's start with the bits that they did get right, because there is still plenty to celebrate here. First off, let's give credit where it's due. This still is hands down the best builder out there in the genre. If you're the kind of nutter who loves tweaking every detail and pulling off mad convoluted designs, then mate, you're in for a treat here, because Planet Coaster's always packed a powerful toolkit, but now you've got the option to scale bits of a prop up or down, which means the architects among us are going to have a field day. I can't wait to see the madness the community cooks up, and already I've seen some cracking designs in the early days from the community. Personally, I'm loving the fact that they've added vendor stands on little tables instead of shoving them in those same old closed up sheds. For the creative folks, it means you can tuck shops away and really embed them into whatever world you're building, making things look proper authentic. Like, have a look at this gem here I nabbed off the workshop, a little surf truck tucked right into the world where pool goers can grab a bite to eat. It reminds me of that all-inclusive holiday that you go on as fat f***s smash back bowls of fries for their morning snack. Now onto the park data, and there is plenty of it. Just like the first one, enough numbers and stats to make Einstein himself shit his pants with delight. All that feedback about your park, it's gold dust really, and makes you feel like the park building god that you're born to be. Are your guests moaning because they're parched? What rides have gone tits up? Are your paths connected, or is everyone just aimlessly wandering around like headless chickens? All this juicy data is right there, making sure you're running a proper park, not just some glorified sandbox. I mean, take those Jurassic Park builders for example, pretty to look at, but barely anything for the number crunchers among us, which was my biggest bugbear. Now don't get too excited, just because all this data exists don't mean it's easy to get to or that it has any depth to it, but I'll get into that disaster later in the review, so stick with it. So let's not forget the big ticket addition, swimming pools. Now don't get it twisted, these are actually a cracking part of Planet Coaster 2 and add a nice bit of flash to your park. You've got intricate water slides, sunbeds just waiting for the Germans to claim, and lifeguards keeping an eye out to make sure little monsters don't go under whilst Mummy is busy flirting with the poolside waiter. Now don't go thinking I built this beauty you're looking at here. No, this gem came straight again from that workshop, but it shows just how detailed and authentic things can look if you've got the patience and the knack for it. Now I'll give graphics and sound their own little spotlight in a bit, but honestly, with additions like these layered over the game's foundation, Planet Coaster 2 should be aiming for that solid score of 8 or 9 out of 10 as the ultimate builder, right? But here's where the one step forward, two steps back mantra kicks in, starting with the pathing mess, and from there it all starts going downhill. Now, one of the so-called improvements in Planet Coaster 2 is how the paths now connect and sink into the environment. I'll give them this. When it comes to plonking down the basics, it's definitely more intuitive. Paths connect and curve just right, and you can whip up plazas and big open concrete spaces for guests to mooch about in. It gives it that proper Disney park vibe, unshackling itself from the usual linear paths that other park builders always seem to cock up. But here's the thing, the implementation is an absolute clusterfuck. park. Once you try anything more intricate, it's like hitting a brick wall. The game doesn't really bother explaining what half the tools do. I can slap down concrete, sure, but getting it all to line up just right or rotate like I want, forget it. And I know it can be done. I've seen folks out there crafting masterpieces, but for me, it's all a bit arse about face. I shouldn't have to go and watch a bloody YouTube video for tips and tricks on path design when the game should be making it obvious. Which brings me neatly to the next headache with Planet Coaster 2, the absolute shambles that is the UI. See, the UI has been made with console players in mind, which means PC players are left with a right mess on their hands. What used to take a couple of clicks now feels like a whole song and dance. To show you what I mean, I booted up the original Planet Coaster for a bit of a comparison. Say I want to plonk down a bin or a trash can for our mates in the mighty America. All I had to do before was click scenery, then hit the path extras tab, and boom, bins pop up for me to peruse. 2 clicks, straightforward as you like. But now, not so easy. Now you click scenery, then create custom, which feels daft anyway, then path extras, and then you hit the bins tab where they all pop up if you've not already lost the will to live by then. We're talking double the number of clicks just to drop down a poxy bin. And that convoluted mess doesn't just stop there, it's the same shite for everything. And look, I know it sounds like a bit of first world problems, but when you're building a park that needs constant tinkering, these extra clicks are a proper pain in the arse, and you're questioning yourself constantly as to where shit can be found in the menus. And the reason is simple: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I can only assume that Frontier then have done this for the console lot, making life easier for anyone trying to build a park with a controller, but again, us PC players, we're left picking up the pieces. And then there's the so-called Steam Workshop, or rather, the sad excuse for one. Now, City Skylines 2 tried pulling this same stunt, ditching Steam's glorious workshop for their own little walled garden, and they botched it up royally. Here, Planet Coaster 2 has done the same thing. First, you got to link your account just to get in. Sure, the one silver lining is that you can load this portal up in-game, grab what you like, and it's right there ready to use. But just like the UI, scrolling through this workshop is clunky and slow. It's nowhere near as quick as Steam's workshop, and forget about any decent user reviews or details, you're flying blind here. I managed to snag a few things off it, but it's just not the same. And here's the kicker: they cap you at 1 gigabyte of downloads. Now that might sound like a fair bit, to be fair, but as the game grows and the designs get more intricate, that's going to fill up faster than you think. For me, it's a daft move, but again, it's clearly been set up for console players, so if you're one of those, it might actually be a nice surprise, but for us PC folks, it's a load of old wank. Now we get to the gameplay elements they've added or bafflingly taken out. Some of these choices make about as much sense as a chocolate teapot. Sure, you could hire new staff like lifeguards, but for some reason they've axed security. That's right, no more vandals kicking off in your park, no broken benches to replace, no strategic thinking on where to shove security cameras. This was a top-notch feature in the original, and ditching it just seems plain daft to me. So what's been added instead? Well, now you've got to slap down electricity distributors to power your shops and rides, and let me say, it's as dumb as rocks. I still can't work out what the generators do, truth be told, the UI, as you know, being as clear as mud, because you just stick these metal blocks near your rides and boom, job done. Guests don't give a toss about them, the units never act up, and you don't even have to keep them in view of staff. Like, what is the actual point of them? Take Parkitect, for example. That game had you running 2 parks side by side, one for staff and supplies and the other for guests, and the trick was to keep one hidden from the other. But here, nah, just chuck this junk down and forget about it. An absolutely useless feature, if you ask me, that adds 0 to the gameplay. Everything here then feels like an early access job, like they're not quite finished cooking it up yet. Here's hoping that they sort that out down the line, because right now it's just half-assed. As for the campaign, it's practically a copy-paste job from before, just throwing a bunch of scenarios at you. I was hoping for a bit of a story, you know, something that let you build up your own personal franchise, maybe throw in rival parks, trying to sabotage you, a bit of drama. There's so much that could have been done here, but no, it's like they just ran out of ideas after the first game. Sure, you have got a franchise mode where you and a mate can make your own parks together like you're in a guild or something, but don't get too excited. It ain't multiplayer in the way that you'd hope, but instead you build your own separate park under the same company name. Then of course there's the usual sandbox mode, but the big one for me is still how the park management systems play out. I was really hoping Planet Coaster 2 would take a page out of the classic theme park games, especially with all that data that I mentioned earlier. Like, let me crank up the salt in my fries to make folks buy more drinks and load those drinks with ice to save on products. It's these little smart ways of making money that no game has really considered since, where the placement of shops and toilets is paramount. Everything now is just so clinical and transactional, and whilst forgivable in the first game as it gave us a great creation tool, Planet Coaster 2 is just more of the same. Staff management is an absolute joke too. Instead of training them up proper, you just chuck them a pay rise and call it a day. No effort, no skill, just a click of a button. Now, 2 Point Hospital had this done right, and for me, it's how it should have been implemented here. And don't get me started on the so-called research system. You aren't required to build a research department or hire researchers to graft away at new ideas. Instead, you just click a button of an item that you want, and like magic, it's researched instantly. No rhyme, no reason. I haven't even got a bloody clue how these so-called research points rack up. It feels like they just throw a few thousand randomly just by playing. It's lazy, plain and simple, and it leaves Planet Coaster 2 feeling like it's been cobbled together without much thought on how to improve over the original. When it comes to graphics, it's a bit of a mixed bag. At first glance you might think they've barely touched a thing, but to be fair, a lot of folks are confusing it with the art style. Now, look closer and you'll see the improvements. The visuals are smoother, the lighting's had a proper upgrade, and now you get these beautiful shadows interacting with light shafts as they cut through the beams of your coasters. The models have more polygons, giving everything a natural, rounded feel, and there's some real attention to detail. Even the paving stones look like someone spent hours lining them up just right. Props and rides have a proper flow now, easy on the eye, and I reckon this is definitely an upgrade, especially with the water effects around those new swimming pools. The animations, they're alright I guess, and even though guest numbers are capped at, I believe it's 6,000, probably to keep consoles from having a meltdown, it still feels plenty lively to me. I love that groups walk around together instead of everyone looking like some sad, lone Tinder profile. Though, to be fair, a few too many blokes walking around with blank faces and kids in tow does make your park seem like a safe haven for the local paedophile ring. But all in all, it is a good look. The issue then is that art style I mentioned. It's hard to argue otherwise, in that it pretty much is unchanged, which makes it feel more like a fancy remaster than a fresh new game. If you're looking for a reason to call this Planet Coaster 1.5, then this right here is probably your strongest case, because even though the graphics are an improvement, are they truly enough of an improvement over the original, which is now almost 8 years old? Now, when it comes to the sound, Planet Coaster 2 absolutely nails it. Little secret for you, I found the original sound design downright addictive. Those tunes would stick in my head for hours after I shut down the PC. Planet Coaster 2 is no different. It's got that perfect upbeat, bouncy soundtrack that just keeps you buzzing along, and when you're building your park, they throw in these lovely acoustic numbers in the background that float in and out, never getting in the way of the gears turning in your head. What I really love are the little effects they've added to the music. Like, I'll be playing along, but when you open a menu, it goes all muffled like you're listening from underwater. It's these little tiny touches that bring so much charm to the game, and it makes you wish they'd put that same thought and attention into the gameplay design. As for the sound effects, they're pretty much like before, but that's no bad thing. The crowds have that proper hustle and bustle vibe. The roller coasters sound magnificent as they thunder down the slopes or clink their way up the chains, and every little noise just brings the park to life. Planet Coaster 2's got a cracking soundscape, and when you're wearing headphones, you'll get lost in your own little Disney world. So this one's a bit of a tough score for me, if I'm honest. Like I said earlier, Planet Coaster 2 should have easily landed an 8 or 9. All it had to do was build on the first game's great foundations. Don't get me wrong, it's no disaster like Kerbal Space Program 2 or City Skylines 2. Those poor sods are doomed forever, never coming back from the grave. Planet Coaster 2 though has a strong underbelly. There's a good game in here, and I genuinely love diving back in, creating my own brand of chaos. This should be a fantastic game, one of the best builders around. But even as a hardened fan, I just can't give it the score it should have earned. There's too much wrong here, too much missing. The UI is a mess, the campaign's bland, the workshop's a letdown, and the park management is still MIA. And look, I know I'm about to sink countless hours into it anyway, and I'm sure the original fans will too, but whisper it gently, people. Planet Coaster 2 has got a faint whiff of early access about it, and honestly, that is probably its biggest letdown of all. Until next time, my lovelies, Reggie out.